How's it going, guys? Today, we're gonna be getting a little comfy, locking into the workbench, and turning this knife into a work of art, hopefully. We are gonna be using the first and original American folk art to do it that's tied to a bunch of stuff in history, not least of which the death of JFK, the United States president that was assassinated. Now, if you haven't guessed from those weird nebulous clues, which we will be diving into more a little bit later, we're gonna be doing some Scrimshaw, baby.
Now, pardon me while I look at Scrimshaw through a magnifying glass. That's good Scrimshaw.
Now, I have been doing a bunch of research on traditional knives recently because I'm looking to do a full restoration of this Barlow knife that my grandpa made me when I was a kid. If you wanna know the full story on that knife, check out my knife collection video. But as I've been doing research, I've been coming across different knives that had Scrimshaw-ing, or that were Scrimshawed on the internet. And I was like, okay, I've heard the word, I've definitely seen this before, but I didn't know that one was one or the other. So I did some research and I found this really cool kit from Molly Jogger that has everything in it that you need to Scrimshaw a knife. It even comes with the knife I just showed you was in the kit as well. I just pulled it out to show you guys. The rad thing is that you can do this on G10, you can do this on micarta, you can do this on a bunch of different stuff. We're gonna be doing it on bone because that's kind of the traditional way to do it. And I'm pretty stoked because I've never done this before and we're gonna give it a shot. We're gonna learn together, we're gonna hang out, we're gonna talk. It's gonna be great. Now, Molly Jogger makes some pretty rad stuff on their website. This complete kit is one of them, and I'll just say I bought this kit with my own money. They didn't sponsor this, they didn't sponsor the video, they didn't send me anything free. I hope that the kit's good, it had good reviews, so let's find out. Now, Scrimshaw centers around the whaling industry in the 18th and 19th century, but it really centered a lot around folk art. And when I say folk art, it centered around ships and whales and squids fighting each other and pretty ladies that these sailors were dreaming about back home. And then it kind of migrated west, and that's actually where I saw a lot of Scrimshaw. All of my grandpas were cowboys, and all of them had like a powder horn hanging on the wall that had some Scrimshaw work done on it. So when I was trying to decide which art to do for mine, Molly Jogger does send you some pretty rad, like little flash sheets essentially that you can use to transfer, which is really cool. So you get some neat art right out of the gate that you could use, but you know, we're doing our own thing here. We're just, you know, hanging out and we're gonna come up with our own art. So originally I was trying to think of some rad desert inspired folk art stuff. And I was thinking, you know, chupacabras or skinwalkers, but those are both real. So I was trying to think of things that were imaginary. And I landed on Dune, the book Dune, because that's actually a cool desert book. So I did Mind Killer for one side, which I thought was pretty rad. And then things kind of fell apart with trying to make a sandworm, making it look like it was gonna eat my van in the desert. I'm just not happy with the sandworm. So I scrapped it. We're not gonna do that one anymore. And we're gonna do something that is pretty cool, is kind of true, and I think that you guys are gonna dig if you've never heard of. We are gonna be doing the red ghost on this trapper knife here. So we got red ghost here and some cool Western font. And then I have this desert scene with a camel, a desert, and some skull and crossbones. So I'm gonna get this thing set up, and I'm gonna tell you guys all about the red ghost. So the kit comes with everything you need to transfer their art or your art to the knife. And as with any good paint job, which we are gonna eventually dye the lines that we make, prep is like 90% of the work. And we're just gonna kind of lightly clean up and rough up just a little bit our bone scales here because they are pretty smooth and we want everything to take and we wanna make sure we don't have any oils or weird greases or anything on these. I'm not a big fan of using steel wool on my knife like this just because I don't want it to get in my pivot, but that's what we got. That's what we got. All right, it looks pretty good and roughed up a bit, cleaned up a little bit. And now we're going to take our charcoal transfer paper here, like so, and then your design will go over that. I have to decide which side is the right side for everything. And then they include a little scribing pencil in the kit, which is cool. So you can transfer that design right over using the charcoal paper. So I'm gonna determine which side is the right side. We're gonna get some tape on this thing and we'll start transferring. Do this. And you know what? Actually, I'm gonna cut this thing in half because I don't wanna have it in my road when I go to do both sides. Now, we actually did order 2 of these kits in case I mess up because, like I said, I've never done this, never done Scrimshaw before. I think I'm gonna need to tape my design down to the front here, put my paper underneath, and then tape the back side down. All right, got a bit of painter's tape, and we'll throw that on. Cool, and now our transfer paper here, we don't really need to lock it in because it's not doing anything but putting color on the scale itself. So we're just gonna put it underneath, make sure that it covers our whole design, which it barely does. So again, something to consider if you're doing this with this kit. is pay attention to how much your scale takes up. Okay, I think we're good there. All right, we're gonna give her a shot and go from there. Yeah, like I said though, the original guys that did this, they were whalers off the coast of like Nantucket and Cape Cod and things like that. At one time, the United States whaling industry was like, we had 3 times as many ships whaling as all other countries in the world combined, which is just wild. And that's because whale fat was used as oil. So basically like Nantucket and Cape Cod were like the Dallas, Texas of the United States at the time. These sailors would end up out on the sea because they would have to go deep sea for all the sperm whales. They would end up on the sea sometimes for like up to a few years at a time. And so this is how they would pass their time. And that's why I called it the original folk art of the Americas, because this is the only recorded art that we have, like folk art, meaning that actual working people came up with it and not bougie people that had too much time on their hands. This was the first art that the European settlers came up with that wasn't borrowed from the natives. That were already here in the Americas. The name's kind of interesting too because it kind of defies definition, which I also really love. And that is because it's some sort of weird mixture of sailor slang, English, and at the time there were a lot of Dutch in that area. And so it's a part of a Dutch word as well, which essentially just means to waste time. That's kind of what a lot of etymologists think where it came from, but there's actually no hard answer. We might get a transfer. I don't know. So we're gonna find out here. Whoa, that worked really good actually. Dope, look at that. So here's the transfer and there's the original. So aces, man, that worked amazingly. Cool. Now we're just gonna start etching. And the one thing that I would say is I have done a little bit of etching in the past. Again, I've never done Scrimshaw or anything like that. But with etching, you don't wanna be scared about depth. Especially when you're dealing with like a bone scale on a pocket knife, you don't want to be worried too much about the depth that you're going. The deeper the better because it's going to allow your ink to go in. So we've got this cool little scribe sent over by Molly Jogger, nice and sharp, and they actually sent over in this kit, there's actually a honing stone in here as well. If you need to sharpen up your scribe, or you could even use it for your pocket knife. Got a little stone in there. Pretty well thought out little kit by Molly Jogger, I'm not gonna lie. Now, what a lot of the sailors used to use back in the day is they would just use sewing needles for the ship's sails, or actually a lot of them would use jackknives. So not only are we doing cool art on a knife using traditional methods, it's also kind of a knife art, which is kind of neat. So we're gonna scratch right into the bone. You know what? I think I'm gonna take it to the stone. Okay. We're gonna give that a shot. Oh yeah, I feel like that's a little bit sharper, a little more fine point. When you're doing this, try to not get your hand on top of your charcoal imprint that you have going on with your scale, because obviously it's just gonna wipe off. Oh yeah, way better. Sick. Now at the beginning of this thing, I had mentioned that this was tied to the death of JFK, and that is actually true. So the world had kind of forgot about Scrimshaw. Whaling fell off at the turn of the 20th century, and then, you know, getting ivory and stuff like that, hunting whales, basically we hunted whales to almost extinction, sperm whales to almost extinction. The whaling industry, like everybody kind of just dispersed and did their own thing. And, you know, in the area, it was recognized as a folk art that people were like, oh yeah, my grandpa did that, or my uncle made this, or whatever, but it wasn't really like an art form most people were paying attention to in the United States. And it was kind of forgotten. And then JFK gets elected president. Well, he was a big fan of the Cape Cod area, and he was a big fan of Scrimshaw art. And he had a handful of these like really impressive old pieces in the Oval Office when he was president. And people saw this, and it kind of brought the attention back to Scrimshawing. So his wife had a Scrimshaw piece made on a whale tooth, because in the 60s you could still get like whale tooths and stuff like that. We're gonna get into why this is basically just a dying art at this point. She had the presidential seal Scrimshawed onto a whale tooth. And that was like his favorite piece of all time. Out of all the pieces he had, that was his favorite piece. He was actually buried with that. His wife put that piece of Scrimshaw in the casket with him. I love the idea of these old workers, right? They didn't have phones, they didn't have magazines, they didn't have much at all. They're out on sea for literally years at a time sometimes. And instead of just consuming something, like I think a lot of us tend to do in our spare time, right? Scrolling, they made something. And I think that's really interesting. And I don't know, whenever I hear stories about folk art, that's usually the case. It's usually taking something that somebody sees no value in and passing the time. it also begs the question, like, what type of stuff do we have sitting around? Like, what type of materials and tools do we have sitting around that we could pass our time with and make something as opposed to just consuming something, right? So this little scroller that they sent is doing a pretty dang good job. I might go over this one more time just for my own paranoid reasons. Because having played around with a little bit of scratching and dyeing things, I know that if it's not deep enough and I put it on and then I go to wipe it away, I'm not gonna have the lines that I want. I'm gonna have to do this 20,000 times and I don't wanna do that. Now, like I said earlier, I was really focusing in on like folk stories, you know, about the West. Because again, that's just where my people are from. That's just what we've done. We've been cowboys for a long time out here in the West. And so I was like, man, it'd be really cool instead of doing like a boat or a scene from the ocean, because honestly, I'm terrified of the ocean. I know nothing about the ocean. I would rather do something that had to do with the desert. And that's where this red ghost idea came in. So the red ghost is actually a sort of real cryptid that exists only in the Arizona desert. And I think that that's really interesting because with a lot of cryptids that you find, like Bigfoots and Loch Nesses and stuff like that, there seems to be like other stories of these things all over the world. So like, you know, the North American Bigfoot, Sasquatch, whatever you want to call it, also has the Yeti, right? That you'll find in the East. Loch Ness, right? There's all sorts of stories of giant fish and monsters and stuff in different lakes and different bodies of water. With the red ghost, it solely exists in the United States in Arizona. And the reason is, and this is why I say it's kind of a real thing. The United States government was trying to create a camel corpse back in the day. I think this was like the 19th century. And so they brought camels over and they were using them in the desert. To me, that still sounds like a good idea. I'm not quite sure why it didn't work out. It just ended up not really working out. And I think that they actually like killed a bunch of the camels because they had nothing to do with them or they couldn't sell them. I can't remember exactly. But anyways, some of the camels they did sell to some of the people locally in the area. And there was prospectors and stuff that bought these camels. The red ghost is like a 15-foot tall camel. And camels already get pretty tall, so like that doesn't even feel like that big of a stretch, right? To say that the thing stood 15 feet tall. But anyways, it was red and it was reported that it had a ghost or a skeleton that rode on the back of it. And it was reported all over this particular area of Arizona over the course of a few years. And everybody said the same thing. It was this giant red demon camel, right? With a skeleton rider. And it was going around and terrorizing people and it was, you know, I don't know, dragging people to hell or whatever demon camels do in their spare time. I don't really know. The interesting thing about it is that this camel probably actually was red. It probably was actually big and it probably did actually have a skeleton on it. Because the theory is that there was some prospector who bought a camel, ended up in the middle of the desert, got injured, got hurt, got whatever, right? Tied himself to his camel, waiting for the camel to take him in somewhere. That's what you do with a horse when you're injured, right? Passes out, passes away, decomposes on the back of the camel. I know, really gross. But that would explain why the camel maybe had mange or something like that and had a skeleton riding on the back of it. I don't know if a lot of you guys know the story of the red ghost. It's something that I actually kind of just recently learned. And so I thought it would be a really cool way to do the Scrimshaw piece would be to do it about the red ghost. My scribe is still feeling really good. And I'm gonna just do one more pass here really quick to get it all going. Before I do the second pass though, I wanna point out this made in the USA on the scribe here. Molly Jogger says that everything in the kit is made in the United States, sourced in the United States, except for the knife. And they're very upfront about that. This particular knife is some sort of an import. It's not a bad little trapper, to be honest, but it's not American made. They do have another kit that has Bear & Son Barlow in it, and that is made in the United States. But I didn't want to do a Barlow because I have another Barlow already, so I did the Trapper, a little bit of a bigger canvas as well. So I'm gonna go over this one more time, and then we're gonna wash her off and see exactly what we get. All right, I have no idea how the skull's gonna turn out because I feel like it got a little rough in there a couple times, but hey, we're learning together. We're gonna see how this thing turns out. Get this cleaned off, and then they sent some ink over, and we're gonna take the ink, we're gonna apply the ink with a Q-tip, and then wipe that off with a wet rag, and see how well we did. And we're just gonna run the sucker. We're gonna see how she does. I won't run it over the entire scale, but I'm not gonna be so finicky about lines. If we stain the whole scale, lesson learned. We're basically just like the original sailors, figuring out how to scrimshaw. Get on the skull. I'm so stressed about the skull. I really don't know what to expect here. Oh, okay. That wiped off really nicely. definitely cannot complain about that. Okay, I don't want to wipe too much because I want that ink to set in a bit, but I also just gonna have to balance it. I think we're gonna have to ink this more than once. But yeah, that damp rag does a really good job at dissipating the ink. Yeah, the skull's okay. My mountains and cactus and my red ghost came out really nice, actually, for a first pass. But probably have to etch a little bit more. But yeah, check that out, guys. I'm pretty stoked on it. I am gonna jump back in with the scribe. I'm gonna go over a couple of these lines that washed out a bit, but for the most part, I'm pretty dang happy with how this turned out. Now, at the beginning of this thing, I made sure it was really apparent that we didn't get the product for free and the video was not sponsored by Molly Jogger. That is because, as we've mentioned on the channel before, we are getting more and more sponsors for the channel. And kind of big news, and I'm just gonna do this in a video passingly, so if you're watching, thanks for being here, appreciate it. Kind of big news is that me and Jamie have actually gone full time with the channel. So it's kind of cool. We keep joking that we're unemployed and homeless because we're actually building Jamie a little apartment over at my house in the garage. So instead of finishing up Fort Wild right now, I'm just gonna go ahead and build another house real quick. Mainly, we're really stoked on all the support you guys have given us thus far to let us make this leap. We're excited about where it's gonna take us. I'll tell you right now, skull and crossbones is not easy. The teeth on the skeleton are gonna be weird. Just gotta make sure you get enough ink down in these lines. Huh, they actually kind of turned out kind of cool, to be honest. I kind of like it. Get these down here. All right, so there it is with a little bit of a cross hatching. We got some texture on the cactus and some eyes on the skull. I gotta dig it. For a first attempt, I feel like this is not bad. This is not bad for a first attempt. So you'll notice some of this ink pull that we have going here. Molly Jogger recommends taking the steel wool and cleaning it up. Like I said, I don't really want to do too much steel wool on this until I absolutely have to. I don't want a bunch of steel wool down in the pivots of my knife. So I'll do this after I do the words on the other side. We'll clean that up a little bit more. But honestly, I'm stoked on that. I'm stoked. We're gonna call it good, and now we're gonna go to the letters and see if if we can get the letters to work or not. All right, so this is a really long piece, and it's a word. I'm pretty sure that I'm gonna be off on the top with my S and my T. But we're gonna lift it and see, and then we can make adjustments if we need to. I am a little off. It looks cool though. All right, we're gonna go ahead and see if we can reuse this at all. I'm gonna separate the S and the T from my template here. So let's see how that yielded. Yeah, I can be happy with that. Definitely a little bit of a shift, but I think we're gonna call that good. It would be really fun to try this with a jackknife, because apparently that was a way that it was done regularly. If you were to buy this kit and then use it on like G10 or micarta, especially micarta, I think this scribe would like just kick butt on micarta. And it's something that I actually want to try. I've never had anything that was white micarta, because why would you? It's gonna get filthy dirty. But if I could like scrimshaw it, right? It'd be pretty cool. 10 points if you know what a scrimshaw person is called. I'm actually gonna tell you, but you can't. Pause the video, go down and comment what somebody who scrimshaw is called and let me know. Okay, I'm gonna trust that you actually did it. So it's a scrimshander, I'm pretty sure. Let me check, I took a note actually, because I wanted to remember what that was called. Yep, scrimshander. That's what somebody who does scrimshaw is called. I think the other reason that I really like this is because of the simplicity of it, right? Like you don't need to go buy a bunch of batteries to anodize. You don't need to go buy, a bunch of dye and take your knife apart. Like to Rit dye it, all awesome things that you can do at home, all things that I've done at home and I enjoy. I've actually made videos about all of those things. But I like this for the simplicity of it. Oof. I just did a nasty pull across this R. I'm learning that small straight lines are very hard because you have to pull and then you have the option to pull through. So our R might have a weird line in it now. But we're learning. And this is a technique that I think would be really cool to do on my grandpa's knife when I do the full restoration on that. Because we have all my family, truck drivers and cowboys, like I always say. And we actually have a family brand, the Jensen family brand. It's called the Rocking J. And I think it'd be really cool to do some scrimshaw art on the knife. That would be, of course, the Rocking J. Just a nice nod to my grandpa and to my family. And to be honest, I probably would have to go out in the middle of the desert and just like get a rusty nail and do it that way, because it just feels a little more appropriate. It's all scratched in, but I am not confident about what it looks like. Definitely some of the lines pulled longer than they should have. I kind of lost some of the lines in the O and the S. So we're gonna ink it. We're gonna see where we messed up, and then we're gonna fix it. I can say right now, I don't know if I'd recommend you doing words, because they're not easy. I'm not sure even what the O and the S are gonna look like, because I did my best, but I think I lost them there for a bit. I don't wanna wipe it. Okay, here we go. Oh, maybe it's not as bad as I thought it was, to be honest. I'm not saying it's great, but it may not be as bad as I thought it was. Yeah, that actually is not that bad. You can see that where I started to get hesitant, where my O and S and T are, I'm gonna have to go over those again. I don't think it's gonna be all that bad. I mean, it's gonna be very hand done, but I think it'll at least be readable. So that's gotta be a win, right? We'll get another pass of ink on this. I think we're deep enough across the board now. And then we will do some fill in, just some cross hatching, and chalk this one up to a learning experience, I think. I don't know, you guys be the judge. When we're all done here, you tell me what you think of it. Give me a 1 to 10. Right now, I'm thinking it's like a 4. Maybe you guys will like it better. Maybe I'm being hard on myself. We're out here doing just like you guys, just figuring stuff out. It's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. I can be happy with that at least. So I'm pretty happy with that. I'm gonna go ahead and just start cross-hatching, doing some fill-in work, ink it one more time, and then we'll get in there and try to clean it up a little bit better. I don't even know, hopefully we got deep enough that we can attract the ink. Yeah, it's actually not half bad, to be honest. Before I keep going, you can see. Honestly, the letters pulled out a lot better than I was anticipating. The hatching, cross-hatching helped to hide some of my overlining, but there's still plenty of overlining on it. But you know, again, just learning. So now what we're gonna do is take our steel wool and try to clean the scales up a bit and see if we can pull any of that color out of the scale. Really, at the end of the day, I don't like the idea of using the steel wool, but it's what came in the kit. So I wanna give it a fighting chance. I know that I'm gonna have a bunch of little metal that I'm gonna have to deal with on this knife now, just little metal shards. But like I said, kind of just use the kit as it came. Seems to be cleaning it up like fine enough, but I really think sandpaper could do a better job. But yeah, I mean, look at all of this, like the steel wool on the knife, the steel wool here on the blade. I'm just not digging it. So we are gonna go ahead and switch to sandpaper. Yeah, so this is 400 grit sandpaper here. It might be too aggressive, but we're gonna go ahead and throw it on. I think I've got some like way high grit stuff too. I'll go ahead and throw it on though and just kind of work some of this color. Sandpaper does seem to be a little more effective at cleaning up the bone. As you can see kind of on this side right here and kind of along the middle, you can see that whiter, it's pulling whiter. And you can get it down to little pieces to help concentrate it maybe a little bit better in between letters or in between designs or anything like that. So I'm gonna work at this for a bit and see where we land. Well, I like the high grit sandpaper a lot better for cleaning than I did the steel wool that was provided. I felt like I was able to get in the cracks and get in between stuff a lot better. I also found that using the scribe very lightly and just kind of like smoothing out areas that had overrun made this side look a lot better than it was looking. I'm not gonna say it looks good, but it looks better. So anyways, this is my Red Ghost Scrimshaw. Let me know what you guys think of it. You know, for a first try, I'm gonna go ahead and give it a 5 out of 10. Tell me what you'd rate it out of 10. We'll catch you on the next one.